Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second day of the UFAW International Animal Welfare Conference. My name is Birte Nielsen. I'm the Research Director of UFAW, and I'm standing in for Hugh this morning for opening the second day of our conference. So welcome to day two. For those of you who were not here yesterday, I will repeat just a few of the things that Hugh introduced us to. There are over 500 delegates at this conference from over 60 countries, and we are very, very pleased that so many of you have chosen to join us for these 3 days. It is going to be a really exciting day, just like yesterday. If you are on social media, please follow us there. And if you are posting about the conference, please tag us. We would love to see what presentations you're following and which ones you are enjoying. The hashtag is UFAW 2025, and on the screen you can see our LinkedIn and Blue Sky addresses. Other social media are available too. For those of you who do not know UFAW, I will do a very brief introduction to who we are. Hugh went through it in a bit more detail yesterday. We are an international scientific and educational animal welfare charity and membership organization, and we have a mission to discover what matters to animals and to develop scientific solutions to animal welfare problems and disseminate this evidence based on animal welfare science. So we are a science-based organization, and that is very much the core of our existence. I have made a summary slide of all the things you do. So we support research, we give out grants, we have student scholarships annually, we mentor students, we pair up people to mentor students that are up and coming in the animal welfare science community. And we have our links network, a network of animal welfare scientists across the world. And if you want to know anything about these 4 things, please go to our website where you can find all the links and all the information that is about this there. We also disseminate research. We want that your results, your research to go out and do its thing in the world. We do this by the annual conference, of which this is the one for 2025. Some of you will know that we have, since lockdown, we have gone to having our annual conferences every second year. It is completely online, which is this year, and every second year it is in person, but also hybrid transmitted at the same time. So next year, where UFAW will turn 100 years old, we will be in London for an in-person conference. So keep an eye out for announcements of that. We also do webinars and seminars across the year. We currently have a webinar series together with AWRN, the Animal Welfare Network, research network, about how animal welfare science is impacted into law and legislation. We also do consultations, especially governmental consultations, to try and get the evidence that you create, the knowledge that scientists create into work. And we also have a UFAW book series, and not least the UFAW journal. And because the journal is close to my heart, I am the joint editor-in-chief together with Bas Rodenberg, whom many of you will know. I will just tell you a little bit more about the journal. So it's a gold open access journal since 2023, and if your university or institute has a transformative agreement with our publisher, which is Cambridge University Press, then you can publish for free. But otherwise, we also give very extensive waivers for authors who cannot pay the article processing charges, the APCs. And I would like to emphasize that animal welfare is a society journal, and it means that any profit is reinvested into UFAW's work, and that includes our grants and our scholarships. So we are trying to create a circular economy for that. Hugh mentioned it yesterday. For those of you who were not there, we have now started a feature called Collections. We started it last year and it has been expanding. I think we have about 4 or 5, if not more. And these are groups of open access articles that highlights key areas of research in animal welfare science. And the most recent collection we have created is Positive Animal Welfare. It's not very large because there is not a lot of work on positive animal welfare yet. So if you are working on that subject, please consider submitting to our journal. I should say that these groupings, these collections also contain articles from before the journal went open access, and they have all been made freely available. So these specific articles that fit into these categories have been made freely available for you to access. So try our collections out. You can also follow the journal on social media. Here are the tags, and if you would like to do that, this is where we announce when new articles come out. So it's a good way of keeping up to date with what's happening. And finally, the practicalities of today. As you will see, we have started today's session 3 hours, I think, before the session yesterday, and tomorrow the session will start even earlier, so 2 hours earlier than now. And this is to try and cater for different time zones so that as many of you can follow this conference and be present here. Because it's only when you're present here you can ask questions, but and I'll get to that in the next slide. But the sessions will be recorded and are available to delegates immediately after the meeting, and they will then be made available to everyone after a certain amount of time, which I have now forgotten. So eventually they will become fully available, but if you want to see them just now because you're a delegate, you can do that straight away. I believe the sessions from yesterday are already up on our YouTube channel. Just a reminder of the hashtag UFAW2025, and you can find the program either on the link that you see on your screen, but it's also in the folder in GoToWebinar where you can download the delegate book, sorry, the abstract book and the program. We would like you to keep your cameras and mics off. And you can ask questions in the question box. I realize now that your screen may not look like the pictogram that is on this slide, but at least you should be able to see that square speech bubble with a question mark in it. That's where you should type in your questions. Please type in questions and please make them short if you can, because that way we can fit more questions in, and we will try to get through as many of them as possible. Because this is a very, very large conference, the program cannot allow you to use the chat. So unfortunately, you cannot chat to other delegates in this setup. And if you have any technical issues, please put them in the question box, and our admin people in the background will try and sort them out for you. And as I said already, the abstract booklet is in the attachment of the GoToWebinar. So with that said, the last thing, yes, we have posters as well. Please visit the posters online. The good thing about the posters is that they are up all the time. So whatever your time zone, you can go and have a look at the posters. You can either use the QR code now on the screen or type in the URL that is there. Please ask questions and vote for the best poster. The best poster will get a prize at the closing of the conference. So please go and see our posters. And this is now the start of day 2, and I believe, Steve, you will take over sharing your screen, so that, because I am also chairing the first session.
Now sharing, Beata.
Thank you. That is good. Yes, thank you. This is the start of the session, and we are very pleased to award the Early Career Researcher of the Year Award 2025 to Dr. Benjamin Lecorps. And just to remind you, this award recognizes the achievements of scientists at the early stages of their career who have made significant contributions to improving the welfare of animals. And I know some people have questions that what early career means, because many of the award winners have very, very impressive CVs. And I can inform you that all award winners have been within 6 years of the end of their PhD work. And the same is the case for Ben. He submitted his PhD thesis in 2020, and he has already made an important contribution to animal welfare science, particularly in understanding animal affective experiences. So Ben has published over 25 scientific papers, many on developing and not least validating non-invasive methods to assess animal emotions, which is one of the key challenges in animal welfare science, as you all know. He has worked on the role of individual differences, and he has upcoming book chapters on animal pain. And on top of all that, Ben is also an excellent mentor and leader who encourages critical thinking when teaching or supervising his students. So, in summary, Ben Lecorps receives the UFAW 2025 Early Career Animal Welfare Researcher Award for his outstanding contributions to animal welfare science through innovative research, theoretical insights, practical solutions, and policy work, and leadership in education. So congratulations, Ben. We all look forward to hearing your talk, in which you present a more nuanced approach to welfare that also targets the cognitive landscapes of animals. So over to Ben. Thank you.
Hi everyone. So first of all, a really, really big thank you to UFAW for the prize and the invitation to present today. Very, very honored, and it means a lot. So before I start, I'd like to thank Dan Wary, who really, really pushed me into thinking more about how animals, including ourselves, really perceive our world and why that matters when we are thinking about animal welfare. Dan gave a talk on this topic at UFAW in 2020, if I remember well. Comparative, it's been 5 years already. So I'll try to go a little further to continue this discussion, but if you haven't seen Dan's talk, it shouldn't prevent you from understanding this one. So for today, I've been told that I could present on anything I wanted, really. So that's a rare opportunity. So I've chosen to speak about some of the more theoretical work that we've conducted in the past 5 years, and I'll try to connect the dots between pre-reviews that we've published, I think, in the past 5 years, and in this in a little less than 15 minutes. So our challenge is on. So I'm sure some of you, and perhaps most of you, have seen this video, but if even just one person has not, I think it's worth it. One simple instruction: if each of you has to count how many times the players in white pass the basketball. You ready? Of course, there are black players also to disrupt you a little bit, but you focus on the white guys. So a few near misses, but so far so good. All right, almost done.
How many passes did you count?
How many?
The correct
15?
answer is 15 passes.
Well, if you haven't, no worries.
But did you see the gorilla?
It was all about the gorilla. What gorilla? Well, that one. I'm sure you can see it now. So maybe some of you have seen it, but I typically, most people, vast majority of people miss it. So don't feel bad if you have, this is absolutely normal. But I'm sure you're wondering, how can we miss something so obvious? The reason is really simple. Our brain does not just objectively report the information coming from our eyes, it is actively filtering it to focus on the essential elements. In other words, and it may be hard to accept, but what we see is not the reality, it is a representation of it. So this example clearly challenges the assumption that the brain is just a receptor. In contrast, the brain is more and more seen as making active inferences about pretty much everything, and this impacts what we see, what we hear, what we feel, etc. The predictive brain theories, or the Bayesian brain, provides unifying conceptions that shed light on the existence of some top-down mechanisms that allow for a better use and integration of information coming from senses. Making prediction about the world helps us focus on what is new or on some specific parts of the information rather than trying to fully describe everything. It's both time and energy saving, if you want it. Anticipating is also good because it helps react more appropriately and more efficiently, which has obvious adaptive functions, right? But sometimes it's misleading. So this has many implications. The first big thing is new information is integrated within the framework of previously acquired knowledge. It's not completely new, it's interpreted. The brain is also generating different scenarios or expectations based on their likelihood. And some will dominate and some will be plausible alternative depending on your experiences. We'll have an example a little bit later on. One important thing is everything is not set in stone. The brain is constantly updating its assumptions based on new knowledge. Oh, and there's something coming up here. The brain needs experiences or information to make accurate predictions. So it leads to the idea that potentially the more the better, but it's controversial. All right, let's take an example. So imagine that you're hiking in one of those many beautiful paths in England, and you suddenly see this dog, not so far away in the field. No leash, no one else around, no way to control it. The dog is not moving, it's alert, but this is all you can get from its intentions. So your expectations, are likely to be predominantly based on your past experiences. Imagine now that the person in this scenario has had predominantly negative interactions with dogs, as I represented it here with the vertical lines on the left side of the left side of the figure. I've represented only 3 potential scenarios. One is negative, one is neutral, and one is positive, based on the small number of interactions or experiences that this person had. For that person, the encounter is likely to turn bad, and therefore they will likely freak out, which may in turn trigger an aggressive response from the dog, leading to a bite or worse, further reinforcing the negative views that this person has about dogs, unless it dies, obviously. So this is basically adding one experience on the very left side of this figure, and it's going to shift a little bit more, making the dominant view even more dominant. However, if nothing happens and the dog happens to be actually very, very friendly, this positive experience is likely to moderately shift the person's views on the dog, on dogs, leading to slightly less negative expectations in the future. So imagine just one more bar in the right and a shift, a very small shift towards higher positive expectations. Another way of seeing this is to look at placebo effects. I think they are the very best example to see how much expectations matter. Let's take a real example in this case with remifentanil provided to people with no positive or negative expectations about the drug's efficacy. Sorry about that. So when people have no expectations, meaning they aren't being told anything, the drug is efficient. It decreases the subjective pain that people feel. So that's good for an analgesic. However, if you're providing positive expectations, then suddenly it boosts the drug's efficacy. It actually doubles it. But if you say to someone just before giving it remifentanil that it's not a very useful drug, then actually it kills the effect. So you can see here that expectations are almost everything. So let's have a look at how we've walked about this. One form of expectations that can greatly shape human well-being is consistent difference in optimism or pessimism. So seeing the glass as half full or half empty. With the development of the now famous judgment bias test, it's now possible to assess animals' expectations, and it's a very simple process. Very briefly, animals are trained to understand that two different cues mean opposite outcomes. The red here in this case means go, and the white here means avoid, don't go. Right? One is reinforced with positive, with reward, and the other one is punished. So animals need some exposure to understand this, and then they behave this way. This beautiful calf is just touching the screen, displaying a red screen, and then collecting its reward. In this case, it's a little bit of milk. It's going to ask for another try on touching this gray box. White screen, avoiding contact. White screen, avoiding contact, and so on. So you see this calf is perfectly trained, thanks to Heather or Juan or Joao. I don't know who did this specifically, but beautiful example. Now, how animals differ in their expectations can be tested by looking at how they respond to ambiguous cues that are basically between the red and white in this case. If animals go to all or most ambiguous cues, and if they go fast, then they show what we call an optimistic expectation. They think it's likely that these are more likely to be rewarded than punished. But if they respond negatively or avoid these cues, then they show a pessimistic response. When you're looking at this from collecting this information in response to different ambiguous occasions, what you can quickly see is that there are two different populations that emerge. Some will be quite pessimistic, they'll be slow to respond, or they will avoid responding at all, and some will be quite optimistic. They will go to every single ambiguous cue and then go fast. And if you're testing this repeatedly, for example, where we did at 25 days and then at 50 days old, what you see is that overall it's quite consistent. So what that means, and what really always sort of surprised me, is that some animals actually display pessimistic expectations and consistent pessimistic expectations very early on in their life. So do that matter? Well, the short answer is yes. So what we've done is we looked at the pain post-disbudding, and one way to quantify pain is to look at how it affects animals' ability to experience pleasure, or animals' willingness to experience pleasure. In this case, consumption of a sweet solution. So you can see that after disbudding, most animals decrease their consumption of sweet solution, as expected. What was a little bit less expected, it was predicted, but was still a risk. This was that pessimism would explain these individual differences. And in this case, you can see that the animals who reacted the most were the most pessimistic ones. So it is a nice demonstration, but it's also better to confirm it with different studies, and it's been done actually for both positive and negative situations. And overall, what we've wrote in one of these reviews is that there is quite a compelling case for making expectations an important driver of animal welfare. So beyond individual differences in expectations, there is perhaps an even stronger argument to be made about how the captive environment can shape animals' expectations, or perhaps even disrupt their ability to generate appropriate predictions. So if the brain creates and constantly refines models of the world based on experiences, then in all logic you need a lot and a variety of experiences to create a good model. The least we can say is that the captive environment of many animals do not provide either. Many animals are deprived from space, meaningful social interactions, and the level of stimulation they are exposed to can be very, very poor. The question for the end of this talk is, how do we think the brain's predictive functions can develop in these environments? How can they develop well? A dysfunctional predictive brain would lead animals to be very poor learners, for example, with rather fixed ways of reacting to new situations. And although there is a general lack of research on these questions, this particular aspect is backed by a number of studies. A meta-analysis in rodents, for example, showed that barren environments greatly affect learning and cognition, especially if these animals were stressed. And recent work in dairy cows, and I'm sure in other species, also showed that individual housing, which is unfortunately still common in the dairy industry, leads to deficits in relearning capacities. So these two examples point at the possibility of greater harms. I personally wonder how disrupted some of these functions are, whether this effect is long-lasting, for example, does it affect the life of adult dairy cows, and how this affects the welfare of captive animals, how important this is. So in addition to being barren, the captive environment is often the source of many negative interactions or many negative experiences. So even if the predictive brain is functional, there is a matter of concern. Here are examples of what lab mice may be frequently subjected to when interacting with humans. These interactions mean that whenever their environment is disrupted, it leads to unpleasant and uncontrollable experiences. We can easily imagine how this affects the expectations these animals generate. To me, this provides a doorway towards the persistent negative belief or expectations about both the environment and perhaps more importantly about oneself. In other words, these animals are likely to consider that anything new is very likely to be threatening and that there is nothing they can do about it. This last point really matters, especially when we are thinking about long-term affective states or suffering or well-being. In the human literature, this idea is growing as well, and there are a number of cognitive factors, also named cognitive vulnerabilities, that are known to affect one's susceptibility to develop psychopathology like mood-related disorders. And central to all of these are the persistent presence of negative belief. So basically, the predictive brain is on the core of all that. So if the captive environment generates negative belief or leads to negative beliefs, in all logic, it also predisposes animals to experience mood-related disorders like depression. So long story short, considering animals as Bayesian entities sheds light on how important it is to consider animals' expectations and to understand that where these expectations come from. Overall, I think it strengthens the link between animal cognition and animal welfare that has sometimes been seen as secondary. And in my view, it is really primary. Future research will need to show how much expectations matter to animal welfare and what different animals need to develop these essential cognitive functions. Overall, I've talked here about animals without considering different species or different other differences. So this needs to be taken into account as well. Overall, I think this may lead to discoveries of potentially new welfare harms based on dysfunctional cognitive systems, like the inability to generate new predictions, but also new ways to improve animal welfare by promoting healthy cognitive functions or maybe engaging in positive training or conduct conditioning. This is it. I made it less than 15 minutes. A big thank you to UFAW again for this opportunity and for the prize, obviously. I'd like to thank all people I've had a chance to work with. Some of you are in this picture taken at the Dairy Center in Agassiz, but there are a lot of people missing, so I'm thinking of all of you. A special thank you to Dan and Nina for their incredible help over the years. And of course, to everyone from the UBC Animal Welfare Program and the Bristol Animal Welfare and Behavior Group, especially Mike Mendel. Last but not least, a special thank you to all animals involved in my research and to you for your attention during this talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ben. Can I ask you to turn on your camera and your microphone? It is good to see you live. And again, congratulations on winning the award. It was well deserved.
Thank you very much.
I will start by the prerogative of the chairperson to have a question of my own, which is, why is it that we have overlooked animal experiences so much in animal welfare science? Is it because we are trying to standardize our subjects too much, or what do you think?
Well, I don't think it's just us. I think, it's been the case for human psychology as well, which has for very long focused on, thinking about the brain as a receptor and not as what it is, really a processing machine. So it has this. It's not just a new ways of thinking about animals. It's really a new ways of thinking about humans as well. So I think it was a very easy path for us to focus on experiences and what we could change rather than the complicated subjective, multiple experiences that animals have during their life. Yeah. I think it's much harder to understand.
There's a question from Bas Rodenberg. Great talk, Ben. In your view, what are the main indicators that we can already use to assess affective state of animals in practice?
In practice, well, that's always the difficult one, right? I think there's probably several. My views are always that if we do enough experimental research, then we can have a good idea, rather good idea, that what different experiences and what they trigger, what they tend to trigger in different animals and so on. So working on pain, for example, when we're working on disbudding, we are using techniques to get the best sense of affective experiences, to make interpretations about what it is like to be disbudded in general, and inform best practice. I'm always struggling with the assessment of affective states of pain or any other in animals directly on site. I'm teaching to vet students, and of course they want tools that they can apply when they visit farms. But it is very hard. Taking the case of disbudding, for example, you can barely tell that animals have just been disbudded if you look at a pen of calves, unless something is really, really wrong. And despite this, it's quite obvious that when we explore it a bit deeper, these animals are definitely in pain. So it's tricky. I think there are changes in behaviors that can be used. There are changes in cognition that have been used, but again, it's hard. Probably automation is the future. Like maybe we can assess better judgment bias, for example, in automated tasks that could give us a sense of whether the animals are doing well or not. But yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. But unfortunately, we are running out of time. Thank you very much for your talk. It is really interesting. And as you all know, you can see these talks later on when they are uploaded. So thank you very much, Ben.
Thank you, Beate.
Our next speaker is Elena Nalon from Eurogroup for Animals, who will talk to us about scientific advocacy for animal welfare. So take it away, Elena.
Thank you and good morning. My name is Elena Nalon and I am the Senior Veterinary Advisor at Eurogroup for Animals. Eurogroup for Animals is the pan-European animal advocacy organization. We are based in Brussels, in Belgium, and we currently have 105 members in 26 European countries and internationally. Our vision is a Europe that values and respects animals as sentient beings, and we work to achieve better legislation, highest possible standards, enforcement, and driving societal change. We have three main roles. We represent civil society towards the European institutions, ensuring that policies, guidance documents, and laws that affect animals take into account their welfare. Our second strand of work is campaigning for change, and we do so with public-facing campaigns or political campaigns, for instance, before the European elections. And last but not least, we are a hub for knowledge sharing. We foster cohesion in the movement and ensure that our asks for animals have solid scientific basis. Though we work in all fields in which animals are used for human benefit, for reasons of time and also because it is my area of expertise, the examples I will use today will mostly be about farmed animals. Looking at the current situation in the European Union, I have to say it's not rosy. Legislative progress for animals has substantially slowed down. After many years of total stalemate, I suppose it's already reason for relief that we have two pieces of legislation under discussion, one on the revision of the EU Animal Transport Regulation and the other on brand new rules for companion animals, primarily to regulate identification and registration and to curb the illegal pet trade, which is rife. Both of these legislative proposals, though, are encountering many obstacles. To give you an idea, MEPs introduced more than 3,000 amendments to the transport proposal. The buzzwords in Brussels at the moment are simplification, competitiveness, economic viability, and it's not particularly good news. Many factors are acting as obstacles in the path of meaningful changes for animals, and these obstacles are increasing in number and in magnitude. The projected global increase in demand for animal products is building a big appetite for the expansion and further industrialization of the sector. New species will potentially be farmed, and the current unstable geopolitical environment is pushing governments to conclude trade deals where ethical considerations are not really taken into account. We have to deal with misinformation and disinformation, which are rampant. And on top of that, the discussions around our treatment of animals, farmed or otherwise, are increasingly polarized. The reasons for the current difficulties in booking progress for animals are complex, but they come at a time when citizens' sentiment in favor of animal welfare is at an all-time high. Only in the past few years, millions of European citizens democratically supported official calls on EU policymakers to phase out all cages from animal production, cruel animal testing, and fur production and imports. We find ourselves in a paradoxical situation. We have a large and increasing body of evidence showing that animals have complex cognitive and emotional lives and needs, and this body of knowledge continues to increase, pushing us to expand our circle of compassion. The public deeply cares about animal welfare and supports legal reforms that better protect them. And yet, the numbers of animals in industrial animal agriculture have never been bigger and will only increase while the pace of change is painfully slow. Which brings me to my question and the topic of the day. How can we bridge this gap? Is it time for scientists to step into the arena or to step into the arena more often, more consistently? There are two ways to look at public engagement as scientists. One is to stand by the traditional principle that scientists should be impartial seekers of truth, who should not express their opinions. Thank you very much. And researchers have been taught that science must be neutral, impartial, objective. But there is also a very lively discussion ongoing within the scientific community about the role of academic advocacy. Now, we can use different terminology. Some refer to public outreach activities, others to scientific advocacy. And in this case, the authors chose academic activism. But the message is that academia needs to activate itself for an era of colliding crises. I really like this concept of activating the scientific community because it is devoid of the sometimes negative connotations that are associated with the term activism. After all, scientists do not operate outside society, they are part of society, and especially for those dealing with animal welfare, the most important impact they can have is arguably in driving positive changes for animals. But what does activation look like for researchers? For some, the frustration is so high that demonstrating is necessary, and I'd say the reasons for demonstrating have become recently even more, if possible. However, this is by no means the only way to activate academia. Academic advocacy can take many forms. Engaging with media outlets is one of them. This is an article appeared a few years ago in The Guardian, breaking the news that fish feel pain when this wasn't common knowledge. People need to know, politicians need to know, and this is the basis for changing minds and legislation because very few read scientific papers. And this is another more recent example in which the authors wrote an online article commenting a case of horse abuse, explaining why certain practices are harmful and unacceptable scientifically, and ultimately calling for a ban on horsewhipping. Scientific advocacy for change can also take the form of LinkedIn posts or articles. LinkedIn now is the place to be for the scientific community for disseminating findings and ideas, not only among peers, but also to the wider public and policymakers. As in this case, for the British Veterinary Association, it can also be a place where the reasons for engaging with policymakers are shared. And this can stimulate further discussions and have a snowball effect. Opinions or review articles that look critically at our treatment of animals or prospective policy changes are healthy because they may challenge long-held assumptions within the scientific community or add new perspectives to the public debate. And here we see two examples. One article challenges the veterinary profession to withdraw support to the intensive pig industry. The other one intervenes in the debate on cage-free farrowing for breeding sows. It's brand new and I haven't seen the full paper yet, but I'm very curious. We may not necessarily agree with the arguments and the conclusions, but I think it's very positive that there are journals dealing with policy and practice reviews and that animal welfare scientists are writing policy-oriented articles to try and accelerate progress and foster healthy debates. Organizing and attending trainings or webinars on how to translate research into impact can also promote activation. The organizers of this conference, together with the Animal Welfare Research Network, are currently running a series of webinars precisely on this topic. And I really invite you to attend or watch the recordings because they are like the advocacy and legislation 101 for scientists. A scientific advocacy project can also look like a vision. In this example, 5 experts in their field described how broiler farming should look like in the next 10 to 20 years, based on their experience. These scientists presented the report and their vision to the European Parliament. I led this project for Eurogroup, and I found this collaboration very inspiring also because it demonstrated that scientists and animal welfare organizations can work together to guide and inspire public policy. And this is my shout out to some groups within the veterinary profession that are, to different degrees, outspoken in denouncing practices we should no longer tolerate and who have taken a clear stance towards policymakers and, in some cases, corporations. This is just a small selection of such groups who create networks, educate, disseminate best practice, and try to drive change under challenging circumstances. Their advocacy topics range from banning the breeding of animals with extreme conformations, like brachycephalic breeds, to exposing the suffering behind slaughter without stunning, ventilation shutdown as a depopulation method, or live animal exports. Others offer safe fora where students and clinical practitioners can share ethical dilemmas. These are not easy battles to fight from within the profession. I'm very hopeful when I follow the work of these groups because one of the enemies of advocacy is isolation, and creating networks of support prevents that. Law firms and university tracks specializing in animal law are also contributing to increase the visibility of the animal cause in the public policy arena. I think that going forward, working together across disciplines and scientific fields will become crucial to accelerate impactful reforms for animals. To better understand how to promote greater activation of the scientific community for animal welfare, we will need to continue creating inclusive opportunities for people to share experiences, challenges, and breakthroughs. There are signs that this is becoming more mainstream, and these on the screen are just some examples of recent events where achieving more impact and more engagement are at the core of the discussion. Now, you might wonder what is in it for you. There is preliminary evidence that engaging in scientific advocacy can be transformative, rewarding, and empowering because it can create new narratives, a sense of community, and accelerate progress. In the end, whatever you decide to do must work for you, whether you write, take part in expert committees, inspire newer generations of scientists, or address policymakers directly. Whatever you do should reflect who you are. If you are curious or want to start somewhere, I'm very happy to give you a first assignment. The European Commission just opened a new call for evidence ahead of its planned revision of animal welfare legislation. The call for evidence, open until the 16th of July, regards several aspects that the Commission wants to incorporate in the revision and covers many species. It will be followed later this year by a public consultation, and anyone can participate. Your contribution will be very valuable, so please check the website of the European Commission and get in touch with us if you need more information or guidance on the process. I have reached the end of my presentation, and there is now some time for questions, but I also want to ask you something. Is the animal welfare community activated enough for impact, in your opinion? And with this, I'd really like to thank you for your attention and for the opportunity to contribute to this conference. I do hope you will follow our work, and again, don't hesitate to get in touch for any questions, remarks, or just to continue the conversation on how to activate academia. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elena. Can I ask you to turn your camera and microphone on, please? There you are. And you have asked and I have allowed you to just give a very, very brief update on the cat and dog vote in the European Parliament, because it went better than expected. So please, Elena, tell us.
Thank you so much, Birte. I wanted to give a quick update on the progress of the new EU draft regulation on the protection of cats and dogs. And last week, after I had recorded my presentation, the European Parliament voted in favor of many important provisions for which we had been pushing. The most important ones are the mandatory identification and registration of all cats and dogs, minimum welfare standards that animal breeders will now have to respect, the ban on the sale of puppies in pet shops, and also a positive list of animals that can be kept as pets. So the vote definitely went in the right direction. The negotiation phase now will start later on this year. But this is the first important step that I wanted to share with you all for a mood boost this morning.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Elena. Loads of questions coming in. One person is asking if there's a risk that if scientists become more increasingly active in advocacy, are they seen more as politicians and increasingly partial? You mentioned it briefly in your talk, but can you just, what are the risks, please?
Yeah, I think so. Firstly, I want to say this is already happening. So I think we have to recognize that it's happening and that we need to create a network of support for people who are engaging in advocacy. Perhaps in the animal welfare science world, a bit less. But in other fields, it's something that has been done for years now. And so I don't think all these scientists have lost credibility. It's a matter of amplifying the purpose of the work one does and bringing robust evidence into the policy arena. So I think it's a matter of how you frame advocacy or activation. I don't think there's if we build a community and we establish and we clearly state why scientists advocate or defend certain findings, I don't think there's a risk of losing the credibility. Quite the contrary.
Yeah. A question here from Baz Rodenberg. Nice call to action, Elena. Is our research applied enough to use for policy advice?
So in certain fields, I think most definitely we have good practice on, at least, I'm talking for farmed animals, which is my field of expertise. We have farmers on the ground already doing many things right, and perhaps not being praised enough. And we have a lot of evidence of practices that should no longer exist. They are no longer justifiable, and they unfortunately still continue. And we will continue to accumulate knowledge and expertise. So as we progress and the knowledge progresses, certainly we can defend more findings. But already I think we have enough applied evidence that we could advocate for.
And is there a risk that that there might be a confounding? I mean, UFAW is a very evidence-based organization, as you know. Is there a risk that we will be confounding ethics and animal welfare?
I am increasingly in favor of working together with others. So building on other disciplines and what they have to bring into the discussion and working in an interdisciplinary manner. So uniting efforts rather than working in silos, as is happening, I think, a little bit too much now, because we need all brains on board to accelerate progress. It's really going too slow.
I think that's an excellent statement to end on. Thank you very much, Elena, for answering our questions and for taking part in this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Felix Nwose from Delta State University in Nigeria, and he will talk about promoting fish welfare in the Nigeria's aquaculture industry. Thank you.
Good day, everyone. My name is Felix Nwose. I'm pleased to be here today to share a review on promoting fish welfare ethical and practical implications of recognizing fish sentience in Nigeria's aquaculture. This presentation draws not just from academic literature, but also from direct fieldwork in fish farm clusters like UFMA and UTE. These clusters offer a window into both the challenges and the opportunities we have in this space. Background and context. Let's begin with the foundation. Scientific consensus now recognizes that fish are sentient beings. That means they have the capacity to feel pain, to experience fear, and to respond to stress. Landmark studies by Lambert et al. 2022 and Snowdon et al. 2014 have documented these findings, changing the way we must think about fish, no longer as silent stocks in fish ponds, in tanks, but as animals with welfare needs. Now, Nigerian aquaculture sector is on a rapid growth trajectory. Recent studies have shown that Nigeria are among African top producers of catfish. Yet, despite this growth, fish welfare is not mainstreamed, not in policies, not in farmer training, not even in farm operations. That disconnect poses a major ethical dilemma, but also a developmental one. Poor welfare leads to higher mortality, lower growth, and reduced profits. Why fish welfare matters? Firstly, from an ethical standpoint, once we acknowledge that fish can suffer, we have a moral responsibility to treat them humanly. This aligns with the universal animal welfare principle of minimizing unnecessary pain and distress. Secondly, it matters for productivity. Stress is a silent enemy in aquaculture. Research by Ashley in 2007 showed that poor welfare lowers disease resistance and feed conversion efficiency. For instance, fish under chronic stress may grow between 20 to 30% slower. This is according to Conte in 2004. This is not just an animal problem, it is a business problem. Thirdly, fish welfare supports sustainability. Good welfare practices reduce the need for antibiotics, improve water use efficiency, and align with the One Health approach, where animal, human, and environmental health are seen as interconnected. So fish welfare isn't a luxury. It is a smart investment for farmers, regulators, and consumers alike. Current gaps in Nigeria. But where do we stand today? A recent survey we conducted in Edo and Delta states involving over 185 smallholder fish farmers revealed a troubling statistics. About 45.7% have never received any training on fish welfare. In many farms, fish are reared in overcrowded ponds. Water is rarely tested, and at slaughter, they are killed using high salinity salt baths, a method that causes prolonged stress and likely suffering. What's even more concerning is that Nigeria has no national welfare policy for fish. Unlike land-based livestock, fish are often left out of animal welfare dialogues, even in legislation and inspection protocols. That policy vacuum creates uncertainty for farmers and leaves fish ethical and policy implications. So what should ethical recognition of sentience look like in practice? It means developing policies that don't just copy Western models, but reflect our local realities. For example, the EU's Directive 98/58/EC recognizes fish welfare as part of minimum animal welfare standards. But in Nigeria, we need a co-created framework, one that involves fish farmers, researchers, NGOs, and policymakers. Rather than focusing on penalties, we can drive change through education, certification, and incentives. Imagine a system where fish farmers receive feed discount for complying with human standards. That is practical and more sustainable in the long run. Practical low-cost solutions. Now the good news. Many welfare improvements are low cost and highly effective. Let's use handling as a case study. Using soft nets and reducing the number of transfer per production cycle significantly lowers stress levels in catfish. In water quality, simple dissolved oxygen meters can help maintain DO level above 5 milligrams per liter. That single metric can improve survival and feed conversion ratio. Even in slaughter, human stunning before slaughter is feasible. Simple stunning methods can be employed. Then, talking about stocking density, keeping fish density below 50 kg per meter square can reduce aggression and improve health outcomes. These are actionable steps any farmer can take, even with limited resources. Implementation strategies. How do we scale this? First, we need to train extension agents, extension officers to include welfare in their farm visits, not just feeding and water management. Secondly, periodic training in cluster farms works. We have piloted this in Nufuma and Ute with promising feedback from farmers. Thirdly, post developing model farms, centers of excellence where human practices are demonstrated in real-time settings. And finally, we should introduce certification system, just like organic or GAP certifications that reward good welfare. These could become marketable labels, increasing fish farmers' competitiveness. This multi-pronged approach ensures that knowledge moves from PowerPoint to fish pond. Broader benefits. The ripple effect of fish welfare are profound. For public health, better fish welfare means less need for antimicrobials, reducing the risk of resistant bacteria. For environmental health, it improves when stress-related waste is reduced and water quality is better managed. For biodiversity too, there are benefits. Many cluster farms are located near natural streams or rivers. Poor welfare practices can lead to runoffs and even affect local ecosystems and other fish populations. All of these fit into one health framework where we aim for a balance between human well-being, animal care, and environmental protection. Fish welfare, therefore, is not an isolated issue. It is a part of a larger vision for a safer, healthier, and more resilient feed system. Conclusion. To conclude, fish are sentient, and that recognition should drive how we rear, handle, and harvest them. We don't need to choose between ethics and economics. Good welfare improves both. But for change to happen, we must develop context-specific policies, We must support farmers through training and incentives, and we must build partnerships across sectors. If we do this, Nigeria can lead Africa in championing human and sustainable aquaculture. A win for animals, a win for farmers, and a win for the planet. Thank you. This image shows a water quality monitoring device measuring dissolved oxygen levels in a pond. A reading of 6.34 milligram per liter is within acceptable range, but the issue here is that the temperature shown is 38.2 degrees Celsius, which is alarmingly high and stressful for most freshwater species. Fish welfare begins with real-time monitoring of parameters like oxygen and temperature. Tools like this, when used often, can help farmers respond early and avoid preventable stress or deaths. Promoting access to such tools or the use of such tools across cluster farms in Nigeria is critical to sustainable aquaculture and biodiversity conservation. This image shows a case of mass mortality involving Claras gariepinus fry, an all too familiar scene in many Nigerian hatcheries. Such losses are often caused by sudden environmental changes, poor water handling, or even delayed sorting and transfer. These are not just economic setbacks for the farmers, but a clear sign of compromised fish welfare. Recognizing fish as sentient beings means we must urgently push for human handling, improve protocols, and training for hatchery farmers. It is time we stop normalizing preventable deaths in our systems.
Thank you very much, Felix. Can you please turn your camera and microphone on? We have a number of questions coming in for you. We can hear you, but we can barely see you. Just waiting for Felix to, there you are. You're a little bit backlit, but we know you're there, Felix, and hearing your answers is more important. Thank you very much for a lovely talk. As a matter of fact, Elena, who spoke just before, has just posted the comment that these are perfect examples of topics to advocate for scientifically. So you are linking very well with the previous talk. Bas Rodenberg says, this is a very relevant topic. Do you know how fish farmers perceive the topic of fish welfare? Can you hear me, Felix?
Hello? Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, so the question from Bas was, do you know how fish farmers in Nigeria perceive the topic of fish welfare?
For some that have heard about it, they believe that profitability comes first before welfare practice. So when you said the idea that fish need to be taken care of, they won't disagree, but they try to put profitability first, not knowing that even with fish welfare practice, they can get a better profit. So some that have heard about it, they believe it is something that they can do, but profit comes first. So that is their some of their view.
Okay, that leads very nicely into, there's a number of questions that's touching upon this, because a lot of the welfare improvements that you are describing are also to do with sustainability and better health and more productivity, which is all very commendable. But how sensible, how sensitive would lawmakers be to animal welfare in its own right? If production was high anyway, we still need to treat these fish well. Are they sensitive for that argument?
Well, for the lawmakers, I'm not too sure if we have so many persons that have pushed forth this argument to them that there is something they call fish welfare. Not to the best of my knowledge, so we'll still have a huge gap. I believe the advocacy though is coming up lately, but for the legislation, I'm not too sure if they have seen any argument that we need to work on fish welfare.
Okay. And of course, this also requires some money, I assume, to improve.
Yeah, yeah. Even for the farmers who need to create the awareness again and again, so that they can understand. Once you get it from the root, legislation will be faster.
Yes, absolutely. And that goes not just for Nigeria, but everywhere, I suppose. There's a question from Ayulo Ulemi who's asking about the stunning practices. Are those stunning practices feasible in Nigeria where you have been working? And are the farmers willing to adopt these stunning practices?
Well, it is feasible, but for at the level we are now, they are still reluctant, especially because of cultural background, and they also believe that using salt baths, for example, can save costs and give them quicker results. So for the stunning, that is why I said there is a huge gap. We still need to get that. So as it is now, they are not open to a stunning method because of the cost.
Yes.
That is one.
You talked a little bit about the lack of training. You said that 45% of the farmers have not received any training. Are there any opportunities for training for them in Nigeria at universities or people coming to tell them about it?
Yes, we are making some progress. I think that baseline study was a grant from UFAW. So we did it in conjunction with some of my departmental lecturers, and we got that. So there is a huge opportunity to get, especially the cluster farmers, because that is where we have more of welfare issues, where you have people channeling, disposing water to the nearest stream. You will see people doing all manners. So there is a huge opportunity for training, and we hope in the nearest future we can get collaborators and some of these farmers.
Excellent. Thank you, Felix. And identifying the problems is very much the first step. We have run out of time, but thank you very much for your talk and for answering all the questions. Thank you, Felix.
Thank you.
Now we turn to the 5 short talks of this morning or afternoon, wherever you are. These are short talks that will be around 3 minutes long. They will be one after the other. So please note down the questions you want to ask, post them in the questions box, the one with the question mark. Please put the first name of the speaker in front of the question so we know which question is for whom. And also these 5 talks also have posters in the poster section. So go and look at the posters afterwards if you haven't had enough information from these very short snippets. So I will give the floor to the 5 short talks, starting with Paul Rose.
Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Paul Rose, and on behalf of my collaborator and co-author, Jack Luton, we'd like to present this short talk on evidence-based husbandry and how to turn that into husbandry-based evidence, why we should evolve how zoos consider animal welfare concepts so that the evidence that we have for care is embedded into all aspects of zoo operations, ultimately enhancing welfare. This short talk and the accompanying poster is based on this paper, Key Concepts for Enhancing Zoo Animal Welfare, Coping, Comfort, Choice, Control, Challenge and Compassion, which can be found open access in the Journal of Applied Animal Welfare Science. We have looked at various influences on zoo welfare, such as animals' abilities to cope and be comfortable, the choices they have in the environments provided for them, the amount of control they have over their behaviour, the challenges that they get to promote behavioural diversity, and the compassionate approach of caregivers to ensure that husbandry aligns with needs. We believe that looking at measurable outputs from the animal, as well as understanding the things that we can provide that make the animal autonomous and have agency, ultimately leads to a better environment for workers in the zoo and for the animal themselves. Therefore, animal welfare and human well-being both benefit. Our idea of turning evidence-based husbandry into husbandry-based evidence starts from looking at how the animal should be kept by appraising and evaluating wild data, natural history, how zoos are keeping animals, and then understanding key aspects of good practice that align with ecology. Once we do this across a broader scale, husbandry itself becomes the evidence for good care, and the outputs that we see from the animals, for example, longevity, breeding rates, young viability, body condition, positive behavioural diversity, all show that our husbandry is working as evidence for good welfare states to be able to be experienced by the species that we are housing. Ultimately, our key message is one of expanding the idea of evidence-based husbandry, which is where we use empirical information to support the development and application of species-specific care. By utilising information on natural history and evolution and behavioural ecology, we understand that our management protocols are aligned with what species have evolved to do and the behaviours they need to perform. Ultimately, this alignment of husbandry with life history can be taken forwards so that the positive outputs from species appropriate care become evidence for how to promote good welfare. And this, in our view, is what husbandry-based evidence is all about. When knowledge on animal care in zoos is used to support interventions in the wild or in other facilities, and these interventions support things like population sustainability, conservation, and positive welfare outcomes, the giving and provision of care is in itself the evidence that welfare can be good for that species wherever it's managed by people. Please see the link to our paper, and do please see the poster that we present for more information. Thank you very much for listening.
Talk about owner demographic factors that are associated with pet rabbit vaccination. This project aimed to assess links between rabbit and owner demographic factors and preventative healthcare strategies by analysing survey data obtained from the PDSA annual Paul Report surveys. These were completed in the years 2021, 2022 and 2023. So why did we complete this study? The uptake of preventative healthcare strategies for pet rabbits in the UK is low. Myxomatosis and rabbit hemorrhagic disease virus are preventable diseases in the UK, but without vaccination, these diseases can cause pain, suffering, and mortality in pet rabbits. So the aim of this study is to identify target areas and propose strategies to improve preventative healthcare provisions for pet rabbits in the UK and ultimately improve health and welfare standards. So here we have listed our key findings from the study. Firstly, 27.9% of the survey respondents stated that their pet rabbits had never been vaccinated. The most common reason why owners stated that they had chosen not to vaccinate their rabbits was because their rabbits were either housed alone or indoors, and the second most common reason was due to financial or time constraints. Using binary multivariate logistic regression analysis, we identified that education, income, and household size were owner demographics that could predict pet rabbit vaccination status. Additionally, provision of a primary vaccination at a young age was identified as a predictor for rabbits receiving additional preventative healthcare treatments, such as booster vaccinations, worm and flea treatments. We also found, however, that our fitness of model tests showed that the results accounted for just 7.4% of the data variation, and therefore other factors that weren't measured in this study were having a significant effect on the dependent variables. So this slide shows the results of our binary multivariate logistic regression analysis. As you can see from our odds ratio values in the fourth column, we have found that respondents earning above the average UK household income were more likely to have vaccinated their pet rabbits. The results also showed that respondents with smaller household sizes and respondents that had a degree or higher education levels were also more likely to have had their pet rabbits vaccinated. So from these findings, how can we aim to improve preventative healthcare and ultimately the welfare of pet rabbits in the UK? Firstly, we suggest that pet healthcare professionals, breeders and pet sales staff could aim to discuss disease risk factors and the importance of preventative healthcare with new or current rabbit owners. Secondly, pet healthcare professionals may also consider the advice they give prospective pet rabbit owners about the financial commitments required when caring for these pets in order to prevent fatal diseases. Finally, breeders, rehomers and pet sales staff may also consider vaccinating rabbits prior to selling or rehoming them if they have the resources available to do so. Thanks very much for your time, and I welcome any further questions.
To my short talk on facilitating dairy cow posture transitions with permissive lying cubicle design. Firstly, a little background about posture transitions in cattle. They rise and they lie down according to species-specific and innate movement patterns. And especially during the rising movement, cows perform a head lunge in which they thrust their heads forwards to gain enough momentum to lift their quite heavy bodies. And for this movement, they need approximately 1 meter of forward space measured from their carpal joints. In especially older barn buildings, this can be a problem because there is not enough forward space. In this case, the cow has to lunge her heads to the left or to the right, as you can see in this picture. But then it's important that this space is not obstructed by cubicle elements such as bar work of the partition. And we conducted a study where we compared two different types of lying cubicles. One that has partitions with open sides that facilitate lateral space sharing between neighboring cubicles. And that is why we call this the permissive cubicle. And the other cubicle type had more bar work in the lateral lunge space. And that's why we called it the restrictive cubicle. And we had 4 farms that had this permissive cubicle and 6 farms with the restrictive cubicle type. And all the farms in the study had only wall-facing cubicles, so no head-to-head cubicles. And the forward lunge space measured from the brisket board was 60 to 70 centimeters on all farms, which we know is insufficient for a forward head lunge. Then to come to the results, we looked at the head lunge movement that the cows make during rising, and there we see that the probability that the head lunge is staggered or not fluent is higher with the restrictive cubicle type. We also see that before lying down, the probability that cows are extensively inspecting their lying area is higher with the restrictive cubicle type, possibly indicating some form of hesitation in the cows to lie down. When looking at the general lying behavior, we see that the total lying duration, so the number of hours per day, is higher in the permissive cubicle type, and also the lying frequency, so how often they transition from standing to lying, is higher in the permissive cubicle type. So then coming to the conclusions, we see that the cows in the permissive cubicles, they were better able to lunge sideways and also less hesitant to lie down. We also see that the cows in the permissive cubicles lay down for longer and more often, possibly indicating an increased comfort. And then we conclude that permissive cubicles, they may partly alleviate the welfare issues in free stalls where it's not possible to increase the forward space. So thank you very much for your attention. I also have a poster in which you can read the results at your own pace, and feel free to contact me if you have any questions or ask them now. Thank you.
My name is Robbie McLaren-Jones. I conduct in vivo research for oncology studies at AstraZeneca, and today I'm going to talk you through the validation and implementation of fur marker pens as a method of primary identification at AZ Cambridge. For our in vivo studies in Cambridge, we mainly use mice, and it's essential to be able to individually identify all the animals on study. So traditionally, we would use one of two methods, either implant a microchip in the scruff or use an ear punch to take ear notches. But chipping requires anesthesia and creates a small wound which occasionally fails to heal, and ear notching causes pain while it's being performed. So neither method is perfect. So when we heard about fur pens, which allow permanent ID marking without causing pain, we were keen to try them out. So we ordered 5 different colors of pen, and then I took a fairly ad hoc approach to test them on several mice, seeking to determine if we should adopt the fur pens as a primary ID method. Seen here are 5 mice marked with their ID numbers from 6 to 10. I found straight away that some characters are very difficult to write on fur, but applying the marks only requires brief restraint of the animal, and the pens are very easy to use. These are the same mice the next day, and as you can see, some smudging has taken place. So unfortunately, some numbers are now even less legible. In terms of permanence though, the marks are excellent. These are the same mice 36 days after marking. And you'll see on my poster as well that I have other mice with marks that lasted for 56 days. The ink fades over time, but it still contrasts well against white fur. And there's no reason that the marks can't be reapplied if they fade too much. In order to address the legibility issue, I came up with this numbering system based on the faces of a 6-sided die, which is much easier to apply reliably to the mouse and therefore much easier to read. That numbering system has been working very well since implementation. In terms of aversiveness, applying the marks doesn't cause any pain, as you just need to touch the fur with the pen tip. We do see a lot of activity in the cage immediately after the marking. Mice tend to groom for 30 to 60 minutes after they've been marked, which explains how the marks get smudged. They're very interested while the ink is wet, but once it dries, they ignore it, and they seem to suffer no lasting behavioral repercussions whatsoever. The pen marks are permanent, minimally aversive, and easy to apply. They only work on white fur, but the majority of our mice are white, so they're very, very useful. My concluding message today is that fur pen marks are a refinement over ear notches, both for the mice and for the in vivo researchers working with them. This ID method is less aversive than ear notching and easier to read. While microchipping remains the preferred ID method for our larger studies, we've ceased ear notching white-furred mice since the start of 2025, and we fur mark them instead. So this amounts to a welfare refinement for around 400 mice so far and counting. So I'm really happy that we've implemented this method successfully. Thank you for listening.
Animal welfare scientist and founder of Animal Insights Research and Consulting. Reindeer are a regular feature in December, appearing in garden centres, parades and winter displays. whilst the presence of reindeer is a joyful signal of Christmas to many people, the experience through a reindeer's eyes has never been assessed. And so one kind approached me with a question. What do we actually know about the welfare of reindeer used in UK festive events? I began by conducting a structured literature review to map reindeer welfare needs using the 5 domains model. This review covered almost 800 peer-reviewed articles reporting experimental or observational data on reindeer welfare. The evidence base is fairly comprehensive for wild and semi-domesticated reindeer, especially around their physical needs. However, there was a marked lack of research on the mental state domain, little research on captive reindeer in general, and no research on their use in entertainment events. From my initial literature review, I concluded that reindeer, as prey animals adapted to cold, open environments, are likely to experience cumulative stress when exposed to confinement, noise, and close human proximity, conditions common in festive display settings. A year later, one kind sent me video footage from 8 festive events of 27 reindeer, asking for an expert opinion to bolster their campaign. But, of course, being a scientist, I didn't want to rely on instinct. I wanted evidence. And so, I created a 34-point welfare assessment tool for reindeer in entertainment events based on validated frameworks like AWIN and welfare quality, adapted for use with video, and grounded in the 5 domains. Even with potential bias and a limited sample size, what I found was consistent and troubling. The nutritional and physical needs of reindeer were rarely met, instead being exposed to loud noise and forced public interaction, with no opportunity to withdraw. In response, reindeer rarely exhibited natural behaviours like foraging, rumination, or resting. And most troubling was the overt expression of stress or compromised coping in the majority of events, including behaviours strongly suggestive of learned helplessness, trembling, wide eyes, and immobility. Thus, although the animals often appeared physically healthy, there were clear indicators of poor welfare, raising legitimate welfare concerns and suggesting widespread non-compliance with UK animal welfare legislation. I'd like to thank One Kind for commissioning and supporting this work. Through Animal Insights Research and Consulting, I'm aiming to build on this foundation, understand the scale of the problem, exploring practical applications, and ultimately translating the evidence base into real-world change for reindeer. Thank you.
Thank you very much to our 5 very fast short talk speakers. Can I ask you all to put your cameras and microphones on, because the questions are coming in hard and fast in the question box. Hello, everyone. Who are we missing? Heather? Are you there? We will start with some of the other questions then.
Sorry,
Okay, that's okay, Heather. We'll just start with a question for someone else. So we have a question here from Steve Wickens to Paul. For many zoos, is the main challenge providing an environment that is similar to that the animals would experience in the wild due to climate and other issues? So does this mean that there are some animals who shouldn't be kept by certain zoos?
Great question. Thank you very much. Yes, there are some real challenges with recreating macro and microclimates for particular species. That is already factored into some husbandry guidelines for some species that shouldn't be kept at particular latitudes or longitudes, for example. What we are advocating for is more evidence collection across an animal's natural ranges to make sure that all forms of husbandry guideline are actually based on the ecological needs of the animal, so that wherever it is found and whatever resources it access, we are then able to provide that as best possible in the zoo. But yes, that's spot on, that there are some species that are much more challenging from an environmental perspective.
Thank you very much. I have a question here for Taylor. From Zara Ziegler, how can your results be implemented in the care for UK reindeers? Are there any regulation plans?
Yeah, so that is a very astute question, and essentially no. Reindeer are one of those kind of overlooked species, and they kind of, interestingly, when the new zoo standards came out, they were rated as quite difficult to keep, yet there's really no idea of how many reindeer we have in the UK, what they're used for, and, you know, pass the basic license to exhibit them in shopping centres and things like that. So that's where actually shocked me, to be honest, and that's where I want to take this research, to understand the scale of the problem, and then hopefully, as Elena mentioned, use the evidence to get into policy and make a difference there.
Okay. Thank you very much, Taylor. The next question is for Robbie. A question from Baz Rodenberg. Could the colors affect the behavior of the mice? I mean, this is something that we sometimes see in poultry, that it changes the social behaviors. Did you see any of that?
No, I haven't noticed that at all. Probably haven't looked into it deeply enough to investigate that, as it didn't occur to me that they would be bothered by it. But yeah, we don't seem to see any behavioral changes that are long lasting once the ink's dry. So, but maybe something to look into more deeply.
And a question for Stein: did you find any health differences between, excuse me, the restrictive and permissive cubicles? For instance, higher levels of lameness or something like that?
No, we did not look at health indicators, unfortunately, because we were on farm, so we had a short window to collect data. But would be interested, definitely also looking at like hock lesions, because they collide with the partitions often. So that's something else to investigate for sure.
Thank you very much. Sorry for the quick fire round here. Heather, you are on next, as you could probably have guessed. Is one of the reasons for this low vaccination rate, is that because rabbits are generally seen as cheap and easy pets?
Sorry, 1 second. It's hard to say. Obviously, our study didn't specifically look into that. The main reasons we found for vaccination were for not vaccination was stated that rabbits weren't outside. However, we do believe that there could be some miscommunication, like with owners and sellers, of lack of awareness of vaccination status or the need to vaccinate them. So this could be a factor, but it wasn't specifically stated as our reasons when we did our qualitative assessment.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going back. Sorry, this is a little bit random here. I'm going back to Taylor now. Just did any of those showing the reindeer attempt to habituate them to being displayed or to mitigate their stress in any way?
So that's a really good area to look at in the future. Unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, but that wasn't something I was able to assess within the scope of this project. Essentially, One Kind sent me a fair few videos, and I think that they wanted more of a commentary, and I took it a bit beyond that and did this assessment tool for the videos. You would hope that some level of habituation occurred, but judging by a lot of the animals' behavior, it's not worked very well if they have done it. So that's where I really want to look into the perception of, first find out who are keeping reindeer and the scale of the problem in the UK, and then find out the perceptions of UK reindeer owners and exhibitors.
Okay, thank you. Paul, you're on next again. A provocative question. How can we ensure the quality of the data that we collect from zoos?
Yeah, excellent point. It's something that is a bit of a minefield, particularly if we do husbandry surveys and we get incomplete responses. We need to make sure that we are consistently re-evaluating practice, and we work together with those that do population management decisions for animals. So, for example, those that are in charge of stud books, for example, to get those holders of species to consistently and reliably fill in surveys. But yes, the trouble comes if we don't get enough responses across all holders, then you could be potentially making decisions based on a very limited data set. So yes, it's something to certainly consider moving forwards to make sure that people provide data consistently and in a quality manner.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much to all of you. The time is almost up. As you all said, you have posters on the poster, online poster system, lacking my words here. So please go and have a look at the posters of all of these and ask questions there. These questions can be asked any time of day, but they will be answered when these guys have the time to do it. So thank you very much, all of you. And before, there's only left for me to say this is the end of the first session of today. We now have a break of around 35 minutes. So we come back here and start on the dot 10 past the hour. In Britain, that is 10 past 12, but 10 past the hour, and your next chair will be Bas Rodenberg. So see you all here for a precise start at 12:10. Thank you very much.